The Via Stoica Podcast with Brendan and Benny. Powered by viastoica.com, your home for coaching, workshops, quotes, and Stoic content that inspires. In a time where everything we want is just a simple buy button away, where we can compare ourselves with more and more people to see how well they live and how miserable we are, the Stoics offer a solution to stop that endless chasing of our external goals, but to go within and find peace and calm. Welcome to the Via Stoica Podcast. My name is Benny, and today we're going to look at the discipline of desire. In these next 3 episodes, we're going to take you through the 3 disciplines that the Stoics, especially the later Romans, really held high, and they saw that as a good guide to live more peaceful. We have the discipline of desire, the discipline of assent, and the discipline of action. We're going to go through all of them, but today we're going to look at the discipline of desire. We're going to look at what it is, we're going to look at how it affects us in our lives, and then we're going to look at some of the practices that we can use to help us live better. And as you've listened to the introduction, this is all about our wants, our desires, but also our aversions, the things that we wish to avoid. And Epictetus is very strong at this point. You can open, the handbook, the Enchiridion, the discourses. You can see a lot of these topics coming up, and you can see the discipline of desire and all the other 2 as well. But you can see this one specifically sprinkled in here and there throughout the text. So let's dive in and see what it really is, right? So we have these 3 disciplines, but we'll start with a little quote from Epictetus. It comes from the Discourses, Book 4, Chapter 1. He says, "For freedom is not secured by the fulfillment of people's desires, but by the suppression of desire." Now, this is a little bit tricky, right? Because this is something that we will dive into a little bit later on as well. But he talks about the suppression of desire. Now, that's something for us who are just on the start of our journey. We're learning to really manage our desires, to really manage our wants, but also our aversions. And Epictetus says, maybe we should start to suppress the desires before we are able to give it a really balanced outlook, right? Because we also have to remember that the Stoics are separating themselves from the Cynics. The Cynics say virtue is the only good, but the Stoics, they have the preferred indifferences, right? There are things that we do prefer to things that we dispreferred indifferences, for example, wealth to poverty, right? Health to sickness, but they are not necessary for us to live the good life. That's something that we've got to keep in mind. So we're going to dive a little bit more, right? So this is all about training our impulses, right? Training the wishes and our aversions. So how do we train them? We got to first learn what they are. And obviously in a time nowadays where we are bombarded with marketing, with algorithms, with computers that seemingly seem to listen or even hear our thoughts, right? Where an ad shows up and shows us the things that we've been thinking about or talking about and that we want. And then when we look at the social media side of it, and we can compare ourselves to all these other people, and we see images of them being on a great holiday and being on a lovely, driving a great car or having all these fancy things, right? And obviously on these pictures, we see them all smiling. Right? We see them all laughing. We see them all having a great time. What better advertisement can you have as a product than the people themselves showing how great it is? But we don't see those people when they are at home, right? Or when the car is in the driving in the parking lot and just sitting there. Or maybe they're driving after a few miles and no one is looking at them anymore. And that sense of fulfillment that we get for that instant, that first moment of having these external slowly dwindles away. And why is that? Why is that happening, right? So we've got to look into that, and the Stoics give us some really good clues in that. And they talk about, we gotta know what we want. We got to know what we have to focus our desires on. The oftentimes what happens in these cases, and I get this question often a lot, right? People ask but am I not allowed to have a fancy car, or am I not allowed to have things? Yes, you can, right? Sorry, Alex. Yes, you can, but you have to remember what it is. It's an external. Right? It's something but you have to remember what it is. It's an external. It's something that isn't really going to give you the joy that you want, at least not the joy that the Stoics are after, right? The deep sense of joy, and that can only come from one part. That can only come from being virtuous. Yes, you can have a nice car. Yes, you can have a nice house, but you have to remember that it cannot disturb your peace of mind. And that's really what the Stoics are after. And that's where Epictetus, even 2,000 years ago, was telling his students, be careful what you wish for. There's a saying that says, don't drive your dream car, Because once you're driving it, then you just see that it's just a normal car, right? And after a few miles, even your dream car has seen that little bubble explode. So we have to make sure that we correctly judge the things that are there. And that goes the same for our aversions, right? There are things that we wish to avoid, where at one point we're looking for success, and on the other hand, we're trying to avoid failure. We're looking for promotion, not the demotion, or to get fired. And that's because we add the label to those things of being good and bad. We say being fired is a bad thing. Well, who knows? Do you know if you get fired from this job that you might not find a better one? Maybe that's the best thing that could ever happen to you. A relationship ending. That's again, it's an external. If that happens, who knows whether it's a good or a bad thing? That's up to you. That's how you deal with it. And that's something that we've got to remember in these cases. So the Stoics, they tell us like what is truly good and what is truly bad. What is truly good? The Stoics are very clear at this. Virtue. Virtue is the only good. They go right aligned with the Cynics right there. Virtue is the only good. Vice is the only bad, right? So what is that? Where can we find that virtue and where can we find the vice? That's not in the externals, not on those preferred indifferences, not on those dispreferred indifferences, right? Where being fired as a dispreferred indifferences, that's something that we don't prefer. We prefer to have a job. But who knows? Again, maybe that's the better way to go. Now, the virtues, that's where we've got to go. If we really want to find what is the good thing to do, where is the good life to be found? How do we align our desires with the right thing, right? We have to live in accordance to nature, that the Stoics say. That's really key to this as well. So our desires are really important to understand, like where do we align them to? If we want to reach that joy, right, the good emotions, and we want to avoid having the bad emotions, the pathos, and that's really something that we have to understand. So we have to redirect this desire to the right place. We don't have to suppress it. Although, if you remember that first quote that I said, Epictetus kind of mentioned it a little bit that we have to suppress it, right? And he goes a little bit deeper with this because we are learning, and we got to remember that with Stoicism, this is all about making progress. This isn't about just applying it right now and then suddenly we have it, right? Or we read a book and text and it's like, oh wow, now I can do it every time. I myself mess up all the time. This is a big topic for me, this desire part, because I want things as well. I do live a minimalistic lifestyle. I have my life is in a backpack, and a rucksack is my office. That's everything I own. But yet I do have my desires. I do have things that I wish, things that I want. And that's sometimes difficult to deal with. And that goes for everyone, right? We are all human beings, but we have to align it in the proper way. And as we start this training, as we start this journey to master, to channel our desires, our aversions in the right way, Epictetus tells us to, at the beginning, while we're in this learning phase and while we cannot really manage the desires correctly, he says that, suppress them. Say, if you want something, say, no, I don't want it. But be very strict with yourself because those desires can take you into a place where you might not want to go. They can make your mind, your thoughts clouded and your direction, your actions channeled towards something that isn't good for you. So he goes to say in his handbook at the second part that Arrian said. So Arrian figured that this was pretty important, right? That this was the second entry that he made as one of the summaries from the discourses that he took. So Arrian starts with this. He says, for the present, totally suppress desire. For if you desire any of the things that are not up to us, you must necessarily be unfortunate. And none of the things which are up to us and which would be right to desire is yet within your reach. So he puts us in a very precarious situation, right? He says, like, yeah, you're stuck in between two places. If you desire something that's not up to us, right, is external, you're gonna be unfortunate because that thing is probably not gonna, come, or it's a fragile something. You might have it now, but it might be gone. Again, if we take the example of a car, you might have the dream car now, but it might be stolen, right? Or it might be scratched, or it might be damaged, or it might break. So does that keep you up at night? If you have this car, do you spend all night thinking about it, or if you're afraid to drive it? I remember at one point when if I bought some expensive clothes, I was afraid to wear it. And then at one point it's like, what is the duty of clothes, right? What is the role of piece of clothes? Be worn. But if it's too expensive and you're too afraid to wear it, you're not doing justice to this material, to this external. No, you're doing it to yourself. So we've got to be sure that we can handle these externals right before we actually want them. And yes, we do need a car if you live somewhere far away, right? Or if you can walk. We do need a house. We do need all of these things. Yes, right. But we shouldn't always keep aiming for something more, right? We shouldn't go and extend those wants. When we have a car, we shouldn't start already thinking about buying the next one. So Epictetus tells us here, and as translated or as captured by Arian, to suppress those desires of externals because they're going to make us unfortunate, because we're never going to fulfill those wants. And with the aversions, we're never going to not fall into them. And then we're always going to be fearful. So Epictetus puts us in that side. Is like, don't desire those things because you're not ready for it. And then he focuses on, the things that are up to us, but it's not yet within our reach because we're not trained far enough. How good are we with really focusing on what are our thoughts, right? What is in our control? Can I form my opinions on the right information, on what's really happening? Can I make my actions aligned with nature, aligned with justice, courage, temperance, and wisdom? Am I really that close to that? If I am, great. Then you can focus more on that. But at the moment, at least for me, it's very difficult. And Epictetus tells us it's not within your reach. So we've got to be careful with what we want, but we have to focus on wanting the right things. So we have to really focus it inward. We have to say, okay, what is it that I want? What makes my life good? And if I can have that car without having to forego my virtues, my values, my principles, maybe, for example, by working in a certain job or having a boss that makes me do things, working too late and not being able to spend time with my family, my friends, doing the things that I really want, maybe that car isn't worth it. Maybe I should aim for something a little bit less expensive. Maybe I should just be satisfied with what I have. Right? Sometimes the promotion isn't the best thing that we could wish for because it will obviously, take up more time. We have to pay a price for it. Nothing comes for free. So let's try to change our mindset in this. We can find out how we can stop craving for these externals. One way to do that is by simply practicing gratitude. We can say, I'm grateful for what I have right now. Okay, it would be nice to have a better car, but I have one car that works, or I have a house that is fine, right? I have all these, I have the job that I need to live the good life right now. I can have, the food that is good for me. I don't need to go and live, go out into these lavish restaurants and eat there every day. I can do it less. I can find out more nutritious foods that are more aligned with where I am and what I live. Musonius Rufus has a good idea for a Stoic diet. He says, eat what is local and things that you don't have to heat up too much. Right? So there's even a Stoic view on that, on food, on eating, right? But we have to make sure that they are in line with moderation, right? That's why that part of the four virtues is important. Because if we misalign those desires and aversions, then again, we're chasing something that isn't ours, and we're just going to live in an unfortunate state. We're going to live in something with anxiety, right? With fear, because we want to avoid this, we want to have this. But if we align it with virtue, reminding ourselves that even with everything that I have right now, if I practice gratitude, if I practice the virtues, then I can still be a good person. I can be perfectly fine and satisfied with what I have right now. And that's something that we often forget because we are being taught that if we stand still, if we don't make progress, if we don't move forward, we're moving backwards. But in that sense, we never get to really appreciate the present, because we're already with one step in the future. And we're already thinking, like, oh, I've got to get this, I've got to get that. If I only reach there, then I'll be happy. Instead of looking at what we have right now, this moment, the people around us, the things that we do have that allow us to live this life. And yes, there are going to be people who have more, and there are going to be people who have less. But again, that's not within your control. Your control is to look around you and see what you have. Be grateful for it. That's a little bit of that mindset shift. And we also have to try to avoid fearing the external bad things, even illness, even death. Stoics have a very clear view on death. They say death isn't a bad or a good thing. It's something that happens. Nature is constant change, and we are all going to die. Everyone, me, if you are listening here, we all have that thing in common. But we're all being told that that's a bad thing because, yeah, we like life, right? But if we live in constant fear for death or in constant fear of getting ill, and are you really living? Are you really getting the most of it right now? And again, that's what they want. And if we focus on living right in accordance with nature, being virtuous, then we're doing the right thing, right? Then we're living the right way. Now, again, the goal for the Stoics, apart from, reaching that eudaimonic state, the state of good spirit and a good character, is to reach apatheia, which some people think it might be something like apathy, like to be very passive. But it really means to not be under the influence of the bad emotions, the pathos, but to focus on the right, the good emotions, the eupatheia. And we have joy, wish, caution, right? And on the bad ones, we have fear, anger, grief, sadness, all of those that prevent us from being rational, that break our reason apart, where we cannot make the right judgments. For example, something like jealousy. If we compare ourselves with other people who have great lives, who go on a holiday, who seem to be happy, but again, we don't know what's really happening behind the scenes. That jealousy that can take us away from our reasoned thinking to think like, hey, maybe, they might be living a good life, but what do they have to do for it? Maybe they have to work 60, 70 hours a week and never get to spend time together only for that moment. And then then they're busy taking pictures to show the rest of the world how happy they are while they're secretly miserable. I don't know, but if I'm being driven by something like jealousy, and maybe that makes me angry because I want the same thing, it makes me dissatisfied with who I am, it makes me feel bad about myself, then that influence is far too big for me to live the good life. So maybe I need to stop comparing myself with others. But that jealousy, those emotions, those pathos, they can really break our rational mind and prevent us from doing the right thing, prevent us from making the right decisions, the moral choice, maybe skipping on the promotion, maybe going a little bit less on a holiday, maybe to prevent wasting our time to something that we really don't need. Do you really want to do this? Do you really want to buy that? It's creating a little bit more awareness of what we are looking for in life. That is really the key here. And I think that that's something important to do. And when you raise that awareness, when you start to live more virtuous, when you ask yourself the questions, do I really need this? How will this influence my life? Will it actually make me happier? Once we do that, we can evaluate far better what we need in life to make us happy. And I think, and I've realized this myself, but I think that if you are listening here and if you really looked closely at all the things that you have right now, you have everything you need to live a good life. Because the things you have now are the things you wanted to have maybe a month ago, maybe a year ago or 2 years ago. And now you have them, but now you're already looking for the next thing. So just sitting with yourself, with the people around you, with the loved ones, with the stuff that you have, and think, okay, I have everything right here, right now that I need to live the good life. And a big part of that is yourself. You have a rational mind. You have the present. You have everything you need. You're alive. So we have to practice that gratitude, that awareness, and observing a little bit more of what we have. And there's a good quote by Marcus Aurelius. He reminds himself of that as well. He was the emperor of the Roman Empire, and he could have had anything he wished for. But he was also stuck in the Germanic wars up in the north, right? Not in Rome, not in his palace. No, he was in the battlefield, commanding his troops in the cold and the dirt and the rain. And he reminded himself in the Meditations in book 525, he said, at this moment, I have what common nature wants me to have in this moment. And I'm doing what my own nature wants me to be doing at this moment. Again, he focuses, probably when he's not feeling all too great, he focuses on everything that he has right now. And maybe that's a good practice. Maybe you can pause the recording here for a second, take a few minutes and really look around at like what you have right here. And is this where you're supposed to be? Because I can probably think that this is. And if it isn't, then you have to see like, how did I get here? What choices did I make? What am I chasing? What is driving me? Those are the questions we should ask. And how do we know if we're here? Just feel inside. Do you feel peaceful? You feel calm? You feel at ease? And it doesn't have to be 100%, but maybe more peaceful than yesterday. Maybe more peaceful than a month ago. Maybe you feel better at the situation where you are. But it is important to understand and to ask ourselves those questions like, where do I want to go? What kind of life do I want to live? Who am I? That's the basic questions of the Stoics following Socrates, like, know thyself. Who am I? What is my life that I want to have? But always remembering, as Marcus Aurelius tells himself, that we have everything we need right now. First of all, because the only moment that we have is the present. The past is gone, right? The future is unknown. There's no need to really delve too deep on that. Yes, we can have a goal. Yes, we can have a certain direction that we want to go towards, but there's no need to really cling on to it too much because it's so uncertain. We never know that it's going to happen. And we have these goals that we want to chase. We have these things that we wish to avoid. They can cause fear. They can cause anxiety. If that happens, take a deep breath and just focus on what you have right now. And if what you have right now doesn't give you that peace and calm, then maybe you've got to make some decisions. You've got to make some choices, some changes. Now, we have some different things as well when it comes to desire, right? We have this impulse. We have this, and this is what we talk about with the emotions as well when we have the impulsive emotion. We see, for example, an ad, we see something that other people have. It's like, oh, I want this. I want to have this, right? This is that initial impulse when we see something nice and shiny. And it's like, oh, wow, look, that's a better watch than I have right now. Or look at that phone. That's something that's better. That has all these things that I'll probably never use, but I do want it. Has a better camera to help me make pictures of things that I'm never going to look at anymore, but I do want it. And that's an initial impulse that we get. And if we don't control that impulse, then it's going to live a life of itself and we're just going to follow it. And especially when it's fed by other people that we see around us do have these things. They seem to be able to afford them, but we don't know if they're actually able to, or maybe they're digging deep into debt to get it. So we really have to look at ourselves and try to control that initial impulse, because we do have those. But what is the main basic things that we need? Shelter, food, family, people around us, safety, health. Those are the things that are basic things that we need to focus on. The rest are all really just superfluous things. So we can pause, right? This is also a good reminder that if you haven't subscribed yet to the newsletter, the pause, please feel free to do so on the website. You can go right there. There's a little button at the top, or just go to one of the pages and there's going to be a pop-up in a few seconds. You can subscribe there. But we really have to practice that pause. When you feel that desire overtaking you, or maybe that fear of something that you wish to avoid, just take a little pause and ask yourself what's really happening. What do you really want? Is it you want that car specifically? You want that house? You want that car? You want that branded clothes? Or is it because you want people to see you having that? Is it because the opinion of others are far too important for you to wear maybe clothes that don't have a brand? Or that you want to keep renewing the things that you have because you want people to see you wearing something new? What are you really focused on? Is it the opinions of others? Is it you thinking that having this extra step higher will make your life better? Then you have got to ask yourself, what does success mean to me? What does happiness mean to me? But we really got to make sure that we take that little pause and become more aware of all the choices that we make, making sure that they're based on ration and reason. Now, we do have this inner drive the animals have as well, right? The sense of self-preservation, of self-appropriation, doing the thing that is good for us. And this is where even Socrates, but the Stoics, they really tell us, like, people who make bad decisions do them out of ignorance of what the right thing is. The same goes with desires. We chase things that we think are the right thing, the career, all the externals that we mentioned throughout these episodes. We are being fed that information that this is the right thing to chase. We need to follow this. We need to have our kitchen filled with all these great appliances so that we can cook those dishes that we're never going to cook, because we don't have time to do so, because we're always working to afford those things, to pay back the loans, the mortgages, whatever. But if we know what is truly good for us, then we realize that, again, we don't need all of that. We have everything we need right within us. So we have Pierre Hadot, who talks a little bit about this as well. He says, by means of the discipline of desire, we are to desire only that which is useful to the all constituted by the world, because that is what universal reason wants. This comes from the Inner Citadel. If you haven't read that book, it's an excellent book. Whenever people ask me like what to read, and for example, if they start with Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, you can read the How to Think Like a Roman Emperor by Donald Robertson. If you want to go a step further, then Pierre Hadot is the way to go. So we only have to desire what nature, what universal reason wants, what nature wants for us. Again, we do want to have, we are alive, we want to stay alive, but we also have to remember that we will die. But we need to be able to preserve ourselves in the right way, the virtuous way. Sometimes that means, because Stoics are pro-social, sometimes that means making a decision that is good for the greater good, for the society, but not necessarily aligned with what we desire or what we want to avoid. But we have to keep in mind the people around us as well. So sometimes we do have to make decisions that don't align with our personal wants. So again, we're starting to, as beginners, we try to suppress our desires. We want to make sure that we are not too taken carried away with them, because that can happen. We have to make sure that we have our values set straight. So that's something that you've got to ask yourself. What are my values, my principles? What is important in life? And then I think personally, with that, the quote that Seneca said is we are so stingy when it comes to money, right? We always want more and more money, but when it comes to time, we give it away here freely, willy and nilly, 5 minutes here, an hour there. Well, that's the only asset, the only commodity that we can never have. Everything that we spend, we cannot have it back. We don't even know how much we have. So we need to be more aware of our desires and what role they play in our lives, right? So one way we can do this is we can start, for example, a journaling technique. right? So one question that you can ask yourself is like, did I desire something up to me or outside of my control? What was it that I was desiring today? Did I want to have the right judgment? Did I want to do the right thing? Was I living with virtue? Or was I chasing something that I thought was more important, the opinions of others, maybe more money or something else? So really, and one way to do this, you could, for example, draw a circle on a piece of paper. Inside, you say what is up to me, my opinions, my judgments, actions. And outside is like all the things that aren't up to you. And if, for example, another practice is if you're watching TV, let's say, and you see a commercial and the instant goes like, oh, I want this. Wow, look at this. This is great. Or you see someone else having something, it's like, oh, I want that as well. Practice the pause. Ask yourself, what would it take for me to get that? And if I do have it, what would it add to my life? Would it actually make my life better? Or would it make me feel that I'm now at par with this other person, or have the positive view from them that think that I'm successful because I can own all of this stuff? And then we need to focus on the present, right? What is my task in the present moment? What should I be doing right now instead of chasing the things maybe that I want to have in a month that I might not have? Maybe in a month it's already gone, or maybe when I get it, it breaks, or it's not the right thing. How often has it happened that you buy something, it breaks, and it causes you turmoil? We need to be able to focus on the present moment. Ask yourself, what does it demand of me right now? What should I be doing? That's where we want to go. Now, one of the key points here in all of this is to create freedom, right? The discipline of desire. Epictetus talks about this a lot of the times. He calls many of his students, you slave, and you have your master is pointing you to where, he's robbing you of your freedom. So all of this really helps us to create more freedom. And I don't know about, if you're listening, but there's a lot of people who are stuck in their jobs, stuck in their routines, stuck in where they are. And I'm not saying to drastically change everything you're doing, but if you become more aware of what you need in life to live a good life, you can realize that maybe you don't have to add so much pressure on the job that you do, right? Still do your job well, because that's something that really, that helps you feel more fulfilled if you do your job to your utmost capabilities. But maybe you don't have to suck up to the boss. Treat them with respect, but you don't always have to say yes or, bow down to everything they say. Make sure that your values and principles are in check. And again, this doesn't mean to be rude or anything, but it just makes sure that you set your boundaries correctly. Maybe you can find another job, something that aligns more with what you should be doing, with something that you feel that you should be doing. But I myself worked as a teacher. I did like it, but I knew that I wasn't really truly a teacher. And as I knew that, and as I kind of figured out what direction I wanted to go with life, I started making small changes here and there. And it took a while, right? These things don't happen overnight, but it is possible. And if you have a family or people around you, you can communicate this. You can say, hey, this isn't really what I'm supposed to be doing. I have skills, I have qualities, or this is not the life that I want to be chasing. I don't want to work 60 or 80 hours a week. I like to have the 9 to 5 so I can spend my time with my family, my loved ones at 6 o'clock. That's perfectly fine. It's all about creating that awareness, knowing who you are, what you want to do with your life. Again, from an internal perspective, not to chase the externals, but who you are deep inside. That starts with knowing yourself, but also using that peace and as a compass, following your instincts, listening to yourself. So the discipline of desire really helps us to realign and focus our desires to what really matters, our inner peace, reaching that eudaimonic state, doing the right thing, the virtuous thing, reaching that state of apatheia that we mentioned before. And not the anxiety, the fear, the anger, the jealousy of wanting something that is not up to us, chasing those externals. So review that daily and suppress the false desires that you have. That's where we look at the impressions, right? We have had episodes and we talk about this a lot. There's the blog about it as well. I think it's Epictetus' Discourse, book 126. It talks all about this. Make sure that what you see aligns with what it truly is. That fancy car is just a car. Marcus Aurelius tells us, look at it what it is factually. It's just some wheels, metal, an engine, taking you from A to B. That's what it is. Can you afford a fancier one without having any trouble, without getting into financial, problems, having loans here and there, not being able to make ends meet? And maybe that's not the right thing for you to buy. Maybe you want to just take a little bit lower one that brings you right there. And that's what we've got to look at, really what it is that I need to live a good life. Okay, I think we've reached to the final stages of the discipline of desire. It's something that I struggle with as well, oftentimes, but it's getting better. And even if I live a minimalistic lifestyle, yes, there are things that I want. And yes, sometimes that, you see something and that triggers that impulse of desire inside. And then it's time to pause, to reflect on who you are and what is really important. And if you struggle with that and you feel like it's taking over your life, you can book a free consultation. Talk with one of our coaches and see if we can help you align your desires, your aversions better with who you are, with your nature, with universal nature, and also with virtue. So check that out on viastoica.com. And please, if you like this episode and if you like what we're doing here, you can leave a comment, you can leave a rating, a thumbs up. All of that really helps to share this message a little bit more. So thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Thank you for listening to the Via Stoica Podcast. If you have enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and leaving a review. Your feedback will help us reach more like-minded people on the journey to self-improvement. If you want to get in touch with us or find more information, you can go to viastoica.com, your one-stop platform for all things Stoicism and living better. And remember, virtue is the only good.